Hello, everyone. Welcome into today's webinar. My name is Nick Child. I am the Director of Customer Experience here. Today, we're going to be talking about your legal right to federal disability retirement. This is a really big subject that covers a lot, and so I've brought in our senior attorney, Brad Harris, that is one of the foremost experts on this topic in the entire country, and he is going to just go over a few things with you. I'm going to interject some questions as we go, and hopefully this is a interesting listening experience for you to learn more about your rights to federal disability retirement.
Well, thank you, Nick. It's nice to be here, and I appreciate your kind comments there. I'm looking forward to talking to the people today about federal disability retirement, often called OPM disability retirement. Office of Personnel Management is what that OPM stands for. Sometimes it's referred to as medical disability retirement. Basically, what we're talking about is a situation where a federal employee is allowed to separate and take an early retirement due to having a medical condition that is causing him problems at work, him or her problems at work. And I'm really pleased that we get to talk about that today.
So the first thing I want to talk about today is where does this benefit come from within the benefits package of federal employees?
Well, that's a good question. You know, the Office of Personnel Management can be thought of as a HR department for all federal employees all over the United States. And the Office of Personnel Management, they're basically in the business of putting together the benefits for federal employees. That would include such things as your federal employee health benefit program, your federal employee group life insurance program, your thrift savings program. But today we're going to be focusing on the other thing that they do there, the Federal Employee Retirement System, which is basically a pension program for all federal employees. Now, where does this benefit come from? It comes out of the Federal Employee Retirement System. It's an early retirement benefit that already exists for all federal employees if they qualify for it.
So there's not a ton of common knowledge between federal employees about this benefit. Could you talk for a minute about what types of disabilities or injuries can get someone approved for federal disability retirement?
To begin with, a person has to have a medical doctor that's treating them for some kind of physical or mental disorder. They need to have a medical diagnosis that's being treated. Now, medical diagnosis can be orthopedic. Most people think of like a knee replacement or rotator cuff tear, maybe a fracture, something like that. But it doesn't have to be an orthopedic injury. It can be a number of various maladies, such as emotional disorders, for example, anxiety or stress disorder. It could be depression or manic depression. A lot of federal employees come to the federal government from military, and they come with post-traumatic stress disorder. They come to their federal job with already having a post-traumatic stress disorder. If this condition worsens while they're in their federal employment, then that condition can count towards getting them OPM medical disability retirements. It can be some of these more difficult medical diagnoses. For example, fibromyalgia, or a person having, say, for example, chronic fatigue syndrome, or maybe very common problems such as diabetes, morbid obesity, cancer. So my point is, it can even include migraine headaches, a medical condition that's being treated by a medical professional of a physical or an emotional disorder. That's what we have to have. We have to have you being treated for that medical condition, and treatment is being administered to you in order to use that as the qualifying event for OPM medical disability retirement.
And just to be clear, what I hear you saying is this doesn't have to happen on the job.
No, not at all. It just has to happen since you started your job. If you started your job 3 years ago and this is developed since you started your job, then that's all that's required. It's not something that must occur on the job, like a federal workers' compensation claim, although a federal workers' compensation claim would qualify you. But it doesn't have to be caused by the work, it just has to be caused after you started the job. And like I said a few minutes ago, it could actually be a pre existing condition, but the pre existing condition worsened, got worse, became more difficult after you started working. That pre-existing condition, which is exacerbated or aggravated during the time period that you've been employed for the federal government, that would qualify as well. If the medical condition is interfering with your full job performance, that's what we're looking for. So by definition, if a person has been placed into some sort of modified job due to their medical condition, that right there indicates that they can't fully perform their job, and therefore they would probably qualify for OPM medical disability retirement.
So that's a really interesting point, because you might be talking about people who just have a lot of difficulty at work. They're not even fully disabled, that are just having a really hard time and feel like they can't even hang on until retirement. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's a very important point. You know, a lot of times people just kind of hide under the radar when they're having difficulties. They might be having some sort of thing which is just gnawing at them, but they're trying to hide their lack of full performance. And that's stressful in itself, just trying to hide under the radar. They can't really hang on, but they're hiding the fact that they're having difficulty hanging on. You see, what that in itself can create job insecurity. It can create stress. If you have an increased risk of actually losing your job, maybe you need to run to this benefit for your own protection and for your family's income protection.
Yeah, I know a lot of the people that we talk to are in really difficult situations, where there's not a lot of hope. They're scared. They're in pain. They're depressed. So when you say hanging on, what do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes a person is noticeably not doing everything their supervisor requires them to do, and that supervisor has an obligation to make notation to that effect. That supervisor has an obligation to consider placing them on a performance improvement plan, what they call a PIP. That person that's supervising you actually has an obligation to indicate that you're decreased in your rating as far as your job skills, performance, those sorts of things. Also, it's important for them to keep up with such issues such as the amount of sick leave you're using. Or have you used up all of your Federal Medical Leave Act? Are you AWOL? You have to have an excuse not to be at work. You can use sick, yes, but you can only use so much sick leave. You can only use so much FMLA. And then eventually you get placed on AWOL and you're in line to be terminated. So sometimes people even have to borrow leave from other people, asking for the voluntary leave transfer program. That puts a person in a very difficult spot. That hanging on can be quite perplexing. And it can also lead to permanent things in their personnel file, such as letters of reprimand, or maybe proposed removal of, maybe even have an increased risk of loss on the job due to the fact that they're not being able to fully perform. So that's why we think it's important to make a plan for a departure. You know, they talk about an exit plan. Everybody needs to have an exit plan. You don't know. You want to have an exit plan before things get so bad that you're going to go into bankruptcy as a loss due to a loss of income, or you can't pay your bills, can't support your family. You know, a loss of work income is really devastating to most people.
Yeah, I think that's that's why so many people are really scared when they're in that position. They don't know what to do. They know they are not necessarily able to get a workers' compensation claim or something like that, and don't really know where to turn. So this can be a really great benefit for people in that situation, or people that have a federal workers' compensation claim. This can be in addition to that. So So as we talk about those things, what a lot of people aren't aware of is that you can go ahead and apply for federal disability retirement while you are still employed with the federal government, while you're experiencing these lack of performance in your job. And so, Brad, can you give us more details on what that looks like?
It shocks a lot of people to learn that it might be in their best interest to go ahead and apply for medical disability retirement, although they're at work, they're working, they're drawing a check. And one of the big reasons is because it takes so dadgum long for this process to go through the Office of Personnel Management. It just takes a long time to get one of these applications approved. And for that reason, it's quite often in a person's best interest to go ahead and make the application, get that process going, because it's going to take so long to get it approved. And most people think, well, what if I did get it approved, but I'm not quite ready for it? Well, you don't have to actually start receiving the benefit. If, for example, you were taking workers' compensation and you were getting a wage loss reimbursement from workers' comp, it might feel comfortable just to say, I'm just going to stay on workers' comp until they bury me, put me in a pine box and put me down 6 feet under. Well, that might sound like a good way to have income from now on, but that's not that's not what workers' compensation was developed to do. Workers' compensation is considered a temporary benefit. It's the job of the claims examiner as well as your employing agency to get you off of workers' compensation by returning you to work. And they do that by trying to create a job that fits in with the limitations that you have. The doctor is saying you have these various restrictions. So they're supposed to try to put together a job and return you to work. So it's not a good idea to think, oh, I'm just going to stay on workers' comp for the rest of my life. That's not a good plan, really. At any particular time, you can be sent to see Dr. Frankenstein, and Dr. Frankenstein can give them a report that, you could work if you had this, this, and this. And therefore, they offer you that job with those things. And although you might not think that's a suitable job offer, they think it is. Now you're off of workers' comp and can't do this new job that they've offered you. So then you're really up the creek. So that's another reason to go ahead and apply for OPM medical disability retirement and then to switch that faucet on when you need for it to start so that you'll have some kind of income security for you and your family.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you can almost view this as a backup plan to federal workers' compensation. And just so you're aware, too, you can receive a schedule award while you're on federal disability retirement. So there are ways that these things can work together. And even if you're not applying for federal workers' compensation or on that benefit, this is something that you can apply for, too. We don't want to make it sound like you have to have applied for that first. So really, this is a long-term benefit that we're talking about. And as we talk about your financial future, this really provides a lot of security with that. So it should be a part of your financial plan as you move forward. And so Brad's going to talk a little bit more about the goals of federal disability retirement.
Well, Nick, it's just part of human nature to be concerned about your future. Anybody needs to be concerned about their future, particularly if they have responsibilities to their spouse and to their family. So what would happen to you if you had to be separated and you didn't realize you were going to be? You can increase your confidence in that after separation period of your life, and you can decrease the stress of anticipating a bad ending by having some sort of cushion, some sort of bridge to get you all the way up to age 62. What I'm trying to tell you here is OPM medical disability retirement can meet the goal of receiving a steady and permanent stream of income, like a cushion for living expenses until regular retirement. And while you're doing that, you're allowed to keep your health insurance in place. You're allowed to keep your group life insurance in place. And so going to 62, is an important thing. How do you get to 62? As a matter of fact, you can keep your retirement plan going to 62 for a 10% bonus and even voluntarily contributing to your thrift savings plan.
So let's get into the nuts and bolts of federal disability retirement. We're going to talk about how much it pays, how long it lasts, what that looks like for you after 62 when you enter your regular retirement. And one thing that people don't know a lot about is the fact that you can still work while you're on federal disability retirement. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the first thing I want to do is introduce you to this chart here that Brad is going to explain in a little more detail.
If a person were to consider their average of their high three earnings and call that average 100%, call that number the average 100%, let's pretend here it's $100,000. The first year of benefits under medical disability retirement is 60% of whatever that figure is. And thereafter, it's 40% every single year until a person reaches the age of 62. The first year, it's 60% of the high three. Every year thereafter, 40% of that high three. And that benefit continues to pay monthly until the federal employee reaches the age of 62. Now, when that person reaches the age of 62, the benefit is recalculated into a regular retirement pension, and maybe with a 10% bonus because you get all of those years that you were drawing this benefit as credible years of service. By credible years of service, I'm talking about every year the federal employee is on federal disability retirement. That year will count as an earned credible year of federal service. These years accumulated will be added to the pre-existing credible years of service at the age of 62. Now that's very important when you're considering what your retirement pension will look like.
So let me give you an example that might clarify what Brad's saying here. Let's say that I worked for the federal government starting when I was 32 years old and worked for 10 years. Now I'm 42 years old, and let's just say I had an injury that wasn't even a part of the job. I'm out playing golf and I fall, hurt my back or my knee, and I can't perform the duties of my job anymore. What's going to happen there if I can get approved for federal disability retirement? For that first year after I get approved, I'm going to get 60% of my high three average. So let's say my high three average, just to make it nice and even, is $100,000 a year. So that means that next year I'm going to be making $60,000. And until the age of 62, every year after, I'm going to be making $40,000. So with that example, one thing that people miss a lot is the fact that the OPM is going to give me my 10 years of service that I worked from the age of 32 to 42. And in addition to that, they're going to credit me 20 years of service once I reach the age of 62. So now my pension will be calculated as though I've been working there for 30 years. That's right, Brad.
That's right. It's also, based upon what you just got through saying, remind me not to be playing golf with you. If you're the type of guy that's going to go play golf and get hurt where you are having deficiencies at work, you're not really playing golf very well. That's not normally how it works out. But yes, as far as your example, that's correct.
Well, there's always risk of injury when I'm playing with you, Brad. All right, so let's talk about, in addition to what we just talked about, the fact that you can continue to work after you've been approved for federal disability retirement. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
This is the most exciting feature to me about OPM medical disability retirement. Many federal employees who qualify for OPM medical disability retirement are still capable. They still have a lot of life to go. They're not totally disabled. They're just unable to completely do everything about their particular job. That's it. They can still go out there and teach at a junior college, or they can sell real estate. They can go into bookkeeping. They can have a whole other career post-federal employment. And in that new job, in that new life, before they reach the age of 62, the new thing that they're going to do, they can earn up to 80% of what they had been making for the federal government during that time period. That's so gratifying to me that many of our clients go on to pursue other types of employment and enjoy the next portion of their life.
So let me walk you through a chart that describes exactly what Brad is talking about here in context of the example that I gave you before. In that first year, I can make 60% of my high three average. And remember, we said this was a high three average of $100,000. That's just to give you a really nice even number to look at. So I can draw from my federal disability retirement benefit $60,000 that first year. Because I'm allowed to make up 80% of my high three average, that's an additional $80,000. So in that first year, I have the potential income of $140,000 on this benefit, 80 from my new job and 60 from the annuity from the benefit, which is huge. Every year thereafter until I'm 62, I can make up to 120%, meaning that I can make $40,000 a year from my annuity benefit and an additional 80%. So that totals $120,000 a year. So $80,000 from my new job's wages and that $40,000 a year from the annuity benefit.
Yes, that's correct. That's why we like to refer to that as the cushion. You're creating a certain amount of underlying money all the way to 62. That's going to come in every month from the federal government like a clock.
So as you all can hopefully see here, this has the potential to be a huge benefit for anybody that can qualify for it. And there's a lot of people out there that work for the federal government that just aren't aware of this benefit that can qualify for it. So I think it's really interesting how many different life goals that this can meet. And I want you to go back through those real quick, Brad, and just reiterate what people stand to gain by applying for this benefit.
Yes, I can, and I'm delighted to because it changes people's lives so much for the positive. It actually does create a steady and permanent stream of income, which is a cushion for living expenses and other expenses until regular retirement, age 62. It also allows a person to keep their current insurance in place. A lot of people really value their group life insurance and their group health insurance with the federal government. Those insurances you can keep in place despite the fact that you have a decreasing physical condition. Also, it allows you to keep a retirement plan going to 62, knowing that you can continue to contribute to the thrift savings plan if you want to, and maybe even have a 10% bonus for the additional years that you've accrued during this time period. So overall, it increases everyone's confidence in their after-separation life. It decreases stress, and that's what all of us as human beings want to do. We want to have some confidence in the future, and we want to live in such a way as we're experiencing the full measure of life with dignity.
So what I want to make sure everybody understands as we've covered this benefit is that not only do you have a legal right to this benefit, but in your service to the federal government and the United States, you deserve this benefit if you are injured or disabled. This has huge implications to change people's life, and that's what gets us excited to work with people every day. We love seeing people go from situations that aren't ideal, that are scary, sad, and move into a place of security and happiness. And that's the reason that this benefit is in place. And so that's why we love doing what we do. That's why we've enjoyed seeing over 3,500 federal employees get approved with our representation. And so just to close here, I just want Brad to make a few final comments, as he's been doing this for a really long time and has seen so many people's lives changed through this benefit.
Thank you for that, Nick. I would just say that I hear this expression all the time, thank you for your service, and people don't really go through the idea of what that service is and what it entails, and also the concept that that service qualifies a person for something. That service can entitle a person to the benefits that are out there and available. They're just not known about most of the time. It's our honor and it's our privilege to provide our service to you because you've already provided your service to us.
So with that, we're going to conclude this webinar. We're going to leave it open for about 10 to 15 minutes for any questions. We have some team members that are in the Q&A area that you can see, so you can leave a message there to chat with them. If your question doesn't get answered or you have a really specific question about your case, feel free to give us a call. And we will schedule a free consultation with you to talk about your situation. You can also get a ton of information, including upcoming webinars, on our website at federaldisability.com. So with that, we're signing off. Thanks again for being here with us today.